Single dad humiliated for selling sweets to support his son, but a billionaire saw everything and did something that shocked everyone. Comment giving a rating from 0 to 10 for my story. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help. Sweat trickled down the 30-year-old single dad's forehead as he carried the heavy box of homemade fudge through the bustling streets of downtown Manhattan. His muscles ached after more than 8 hours of going door to door, but the thought of his 4-year-old son waiting for him back in their small Brooklyn apartment kept him going. His simple, worn clothes contrasted sharply with his striking, almost aristocratic features, which drew attention wherever he went, but now only served to highlight his impoverished state. At every corner, he faced scornful looks and cutting remarks from those who saw him as a nuisance. Doors slammed quickly when people realized he was approaching, and many didn't even let him finish explaining about his artisanal treats. He swallowed his wounded pride and kept going, because he knew that every piece of fudge sold meant food on the table and a smile on the face of the child who was his only reason for existing. On that particularly sweltering afternoon, when the sun beat mercilessly on the pavement, he approached one of the most imposing buildings in Midtown. The mirrored glass building rose like a monument to power and wealth, making him feel even smaller in the face of such grandeur. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should try his luck in this place where he clearly wasn't welcome. It was then that a group of 5 well-dressed individuals who were chatting animatedly at the building's entrance noticed him. The laughter ceased abruptly, replaced by malicious whispers and scornful glances. The tallest man in the group, wearing an expensive bespoke suit, pointed at him with a cruel smile on his lips. "Look what we have here," he said loudly, drawing the attention of other passers-by. "Just another bum trying to make a quick buck selling garbage on the street." The others joined in the chorus of mockery, surrounding him like predators before wounded prey. A middle-aged woman, dripping in expensive jewelry, sneered as she examined his fudge with obvious disgust. "How gross! He probably made this in some filthy place," she commented loudly, making sure everyone heard. "People like that should be doing real work, not bothering decent folks." The single dad felt his cheeks burn with humiliation, but he kept his head held high, trying to preserve what little dignity he had left. His voice was hoarse as he tried to explain that his fudge was made with fresh ingredients and lots of love, but he was interrupted by even louder laughter. "Love?" scoffed another man in the group. "What do you guys know about love? Probably doesn't even take care of his own kid." The mention of his son was like a punch to the gut. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to defend his honor, but he knew that any violent reaction would only make his situation worse. He needed that money. He needed to sell his fudge, even if it meant swallowing all that humiliation. The man in the suit pulled some coins from his pocket and threw them on the ground with disdain, as if he were feeding pigeons. "Here's your handout, beggar. Now get lost before we call security." The coins rolled across the marble floor, producing a metallic sound that echoed like a condemnation. For a moment he stood paralyzed, torn between the desperate need for that money and the desire to preserve his dignity. But then he thought of the milk he needed to buy, the overdue rent, the innocent smile of the son who trusted him to provide everything. With tears burning his eyes, he slowly bent down to pick up the coins, each one weighing like lead in his trembling hands. The cruel laughter of the aggressors intensified, and he closed his eyes, wishing he could disappear from that place. That's when a female voice, firm and full of authority, cut through the air like a sharp blade. "Stop that immediately!" The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone turned to discover who had dared to interrupt their cruel entertainment. A black limousine had stopped discreetly at the curb, and from it emerged a figure who seemed to have stepped directly from a fashion magazine. The 30-year-old billionaire woman walked towards the group with determined steps, her heels clicking on the marble like the beats of a racing heart. Her beauty was stunning, but it was the contained fury in her dark eyes that really caught attention. She wore an outfit that cost more than many earned in years, but it was the natural authority that emanated from her presence that made everyone recoil instinctively. "How dare you treat another human being like this?" Her voice was low, but charged with an intensity that made everyone tremble. "What kind of people do you think you are?" The man in the suit tried to compose himself, forcing an artificial smile. "Ma'am, we were just having a little fun. These types are always bothering—" "These types?" she interrupted, taking a step forward that made the man recoil. "You mean honest workers trying to support their families? People with enough dignity to work instead of living off others?" Her eyes swept across each face in the group, burning into her memory those expressions of discomfort and shame. Then she turned her attention to the single dad, who was still crouched on the ground, holding the coins with trembling hands. Without hesitating, she approached him and extended her hand to help him up. "Please," she said softly, her voice now filled with a tenderness that contrasted completely with the tone used with the aggressors. He looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and shame, unable to understand why a woman clearly so powerful and influential was bothering to help him. He accepted her hand and rose slowly, still feeling his legs weak from the humiliation he had suffered. "How much for the whole box of fudge?" asked the billionaire, carefully examining the artisanal products with a genuine interest that surprised everyone present. The single dad hesitated, still processing the surreal situation he was experiencing. His voice came out weak as he murmured the total amount, a sum that represented his livelihood for an entire week. She didn't hesitate for a second. "I'll take it all," she declared, pulling from her Italian leather bag an amount that was 10 times greater than what he had asked. "And consider the rest as compensation for the unnecessary humiliation you suffered." The aggressors watched silently, their faces red with embarrassment. The man in the suit tried to approach the billionaire, clearly recognizing who she was, but was met with an icy stare that made him stop in his tracks. "You should be ashamed of yourselves," she said, her voice cutting like ice. "In a civilized society, we treat each other with respect and dignity. Apparently, that's something money can't buy." Without giving any more attention to the humiliated group, she turned completely to the fudge vendor, who held the money with trembling hands, as if it were a dream from which he could wake up at any moment. "What's your name?" she asked gently. He swallowed hard before answering, still impressed by the turn of events. His words came out hesitant, filled with an emotion he could barely control. "What's your background?" she continued, completely ignoring the onlookers who crowded around to watch the unusual scene. When he revealed that he had studied business administration at a state university, but had never been able to find an opportunity in the job market due to lack of experience and connections, her eyes lit up with renewed interest. "Do you have someone to take care of your son during the day?" The question took him by surprise, and he explained about the elderly neighbor who helped in exchange for some fudge and small favors. The billionaire remained silent for a few moments, as if she were making an important decision. When she finally spoke, her words completely changed the course of his life. "I need a personal assistant," she said seriously. "Someone I can trust, who understands the value of honest work, and who isn't just interested in my money. Are you willing to try?" The proposal was so unexpected that he was speechless. She continued, explaining the details of the position: business hours, salary that was more than he had dreamed of earning in years, health insurance for him and his son, and the possibility of professional growth. "But I don't have experience in big companies," he protested, still incredulous at the opportunity being offered. "Experience is acquired," she replied with a smile that completely transformed her expression. "Character isn't. And that's what I saw in you today." 3 days later, he showed up at her office wearing the only suit he had managed to buy with part of the money she had given him. It was a simple piece, far from the elegance of the outfits he saw in the corridors, but it was impeccably clean and well-pressed. Her company was an empire built through smart investments and bold decisions. She had inherited a small fortune from her father and multiplied it dozens of times through applications in stocks, real estate funds, and even some cryptocurrencies she had bought at the beginning of their appreciation. Her net worth in dollars grew constantly, fueled by a brilliant mind for business and an almost supernatural intuition for opportunities. The first few days were challenging. He felt like a fish out of water, surrounded by people who spoke a corporate language he barely understood. But his determination was unwavering, and he studied every night after putting his son to sleep, absorbing every detail about the company's operation. She discreetly watched his progress, impressed by how quickly he assimilated complex information. During meetings, she noticed how he took meticulous notes and asked intelligent questions, always demonstrating a genuine interest in understanding not only what he should do, but why he should do it. The conversations between them began to extend beyond business hours. She discovered that behind the financial hardship there was a cultured man who read voraciously in the few free moments and who had well-founded opinions on various subjects. He in turn began to realize that the cold and calculating mask she wore during the day hid a lonely and wounded woman. One night, when they were working late finishing an important proposal, his phone rang. It was the neighbor informing him that the boy had been crying for his father. She watched discreetly as he talked on the phone, his voice completely transforming when he spoke to the child, full of tenderness and patience. "Daddy will be home soon, my love," he said softly. "Did you brush your teeth? Do you want me to sing that song over the phone?" The scene touched something deep inside her. She hadn't witnessed such pure and unconditional love in a long time. Her past relationships had been marked by financial interest and power games, never by this kind of genuine devotion. When he hung up, he apologized for the inconvenience, but she shook her head, smiling in a way he had never seen before. "You never need to apologize for being a good father," she said sincerely. "Go home. We'll finish this tomorrow." He hesitated, torn between professional and paternal responsibility. She got up and began collecting the documents. "That's an order," she said firmly, but there was affection in her voice. "Your family comes first. Always." As he quickly packed his things, she wondered when was the last time someone had waited for her at home with such love. The loneliness she carried like a second skin seemed to weigh even more at that moment. In the days that followed, she found herself paying attention to small details. How he always carried a photo of his son in his wallet. How his eyes lit up when he talked about the child's small achievements. How he worked with even more determination when he remembered the reason why he was there. The tension between them grew almost imperceptibly. They were glances that lingered a little longer. Hands that touched accidentally when passing documents, moments of silence charged with an electricity that neither dared to acknowledge. One morning, she arrived at the office visibly shaken. She had spent the night awake, tormented by memories of her last relationship, which had ended when she discovered that the man was only interested in her fortune. He immediately noticed her state, and without asking questions, simply prepared her coffee the way she liked it, and organized her schedule so that she had fewer commitments that day. The months that followed brought a gradual but profound change in the dynamic between them. He had become indispensable, not only as an assistant, but as the only person in the company who could read her needs without her having to verbalize them. When she arrived tense from difficult meetings, she found on her desk exactly the documents she needed, organized the way she liked. When she stayed late, she discovered that he had discreetly cancelled her less important commitments for the next day. She, in turn, began to demonstrate an increasing concern for his and his son's well-being. When the boy fell ill with a bad flu, she insisted that he miss work to take care of the child, and the next day appeared with expensive medicines and a private pediatrician to examine him at home. When she learned that they lived in a small, poorly ventilated apartment, she offered a salary increase under the pretext of expanding his responsibilities. The conversations became more intimate and deep. During coffee breaks, she discovered that he wrote poetry in his spare time, words that were born from the pain of his daily struggle, but also from the hope he nurtured for his son's future. He, in turn, learned about the nightmares that had haunted her since the premature death of her parents in an accident, and how loneliness had become her constant companion ever since. One rainy winter afternoon, when the office was empty and only the two of them were working on preparing an important presentation, she made a mistake in a complex spreadsheet. Frustrated with herself, she rested her head in her hands, sighing deeply. He approached to help, getting so close that he could smell the soft perfume she wore, a delicate fragrance that had become familiar and comforting. "Let me see," he murmured, leaning over the computer. His fingers touched hers accidentally when moving the mouse, and both felt an electric current run through their bodies. The moment stretched beyond what was necessary, neither moving away, as if they were hypnotized by the proximity. She raised her face and found him just inches away. Their eyes met, and in that instant all the tension accumulated for months exploded in a magnetic attraction that neither could deny any longer. He swallowed hard, fighting the urge to touch her face, while she felt her heart race in a way she hadn't experienced in years. "We can't," he whispered, his hoarse voice betraying the desire he was trying to suppress. "I know," she replied, but didn't move away. On the contrary, she leaned imperceptibly in his direction. The kiss, when it finally happened, was as inevitable as a storm that forms on the horizon. Soft at first, charged with months of contained tension, then more intense, desperate, as if both were drowning and had found air. She felt her legs weaken, leaning on him, while he held her by the waist as if she were the most precious thing in the world. When they separated, breathless, reality hit them like a bucket of cold water. She was his boss, a powerful woman with a financial empire, while he was just an employee who months before was selling fudge on the street. The difference between them seemed an insurmountable abyss. "That was a mistake," she said, trying to recompose the professional mask, but her voice trembled. "You're right," he agreed, although every fiber of his being screamed otherwise. "It can't happen again." But the weeks that followed proved that promises made in the heat of reason are easily broken by the fire of passion. The looks became even more intense, charged with a new and dangerous complicity. Work messages extended until late at night, with conversations that gradually drifted into more personal and intimate territories. One night, when she was working alone in the office after a particularly grueling meeting with international investors, he appeared with an excuse about forgotten documents. He found her sitting in the leather armchair, looking out the panoramic window that offered a view of the entire illuminated city. "You shouldn't be here so late," he said, approaching slowly. "Neither should you," she replied, turning to face him. There was something different in her eyes that night, a vulnerability that she rarely allowed others to see. He sat in the chair next to her, maintaining a respectful distance, but feeling the magnetic attraction that seemed to pull them towards each other. "Tell me about him," he said softly, knowing instinctively that she needed to talk about something that tormented her. "Who?" she asked, although she knew exactly what he was talking about. "The man who made you build those walls around your heart." The words were like a key that opened gates that had long been closed. She told about the engagement that had ended devastatingly when she discovered that the man had only approached her for the money. How he had feigned love while secretly passing information about her businesses to competitors. How the betrayal had been discovered on the eve of the wedding, when she found messages that revealed that everything had been a cruel staging. "Since then, I've never been able to completely trust anyone again," she confessed, silent tears running down her face. "How can I know if someone loves me for who I am or for what I own?" He moved instinctively, kneeling beside the armchair and holding her hands with tenderness. "Because I saw you that first day," he said with intensity. "I saw how you cared about a humiliated stranger on the street. I saw how you treat every employee in this company, from the janitor to the executives. I saw how your eyes light up when you talk about projects that can help other people. And I saw how you genuinely care about my son's well-being." Her tears intensified, but now they were of a different emotion, deeper and more liberating. "And I wanted you before I even knew who you were," he continued, his voice low and full of emotion. "When you came down from that limousine like an avenging angel, it wasn't your wealth that impressed me. It was your courage, your compassion, your strength." The second kiss was different from the first. Slower, deeper, charged with feelings that went far beyond physical attraction. It was as if two wounded souls had finally found in each other the balm they had been seeking for so long. In the days that followed, they developed a secret code for their interactions. Glances that lasted a second longer during meetings, hands that touched discreetly when passing documents, work messages that contained carefully chosen words to convey hidden meanings. The clandestine relationship brought an intensity that neither had experienced before. Each stolen encounter was precious, each moment of intimacy a little eternity. He discovered that behind the ruthless executive there was a passionate and generous woman, while she became more and more enchanted by his integrity and tenderness. One morning, she woke up smiling for the first time in years, feeling that she had finally found something she thought was lost forever: the possibility of loving and being loved in a genuine way. But happiness built in secret rarely remains hidden forever, and powerful forces within the company were already beginning to notice the subtle change in her posture, the way her eyes unconsciously searched for him during meetings, and how he seemed to know her needs better than any assistant should. The happiness they had built in secret crumbled on a grey March morning, when she was summoned to an emergency meeting with the board of directors. The 5 men who controlled the company's destinies awaited her with somber expressions, documents spread on the mahogany table like evidence of a crime. "We need to talk about your assistant," said the chairman of the board, a 60-year-old man with eyes as cold as ice. "We have troubling information about the nature of your relationship with him." The blood froze in her veins. She had been extremely careful, but apparently not enough. Photos were placed before her, stolen moments in which they were closer than protocol allowed, glances that lasted too long, his hand discreetly touching hers during a meeting. "This is unacceptable," continued another member of the board. "Our company has a reputation to uphold. We cannot allow personal scandals to tarnish our image in the market. Our international investors are already questioning your leadership ability," added a third. "An inappropriate relationship with a subordinate demonstrates a lack of judgment and professionalism." She tried to argue, explaining that nothing improper had happened in the workplace, but her words were cut off by increasingly harsh comments. They had prepared for that ambush, gathering evidence and building arguments that made any defense useless. "You have 2 options," declared the chairman coldly. "Either you fire this man immediately and forget any romantic nonsense, or you will face the consequences. We can make his life a living hell in this town. No respectable company will hire him if they know he was involved in a scandal with us." The threat was clear and devastating. They would not only fire him, but destroy any chance he had of rebuilding his life. She thought of the 4-year-old boy, the daily struggle they faced before she appeared, and knew that she couldn't be responsible for throwing them back into that situation. "What if I choose to stay with him?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. "Then you too will face the consequences," replied the chairman with a cruel smile. "We have ways to make your business life very complicated. Cancelled contracts, suspicious investors, rumors about your emotional stability. You may have built an empire, but we have the power to tear it down." Alone in her office after the meeting, she cried as she hadn't cried since the death of her parents. The decision she needed to make was impossible. Save the man she loved or preserve everything she had fought for years. But when she thought about the boy's future, the innocent child who depended on his father to survive, she knew there was no real choice. That afternoon, when he arrived at the office with the smile he always brought when he saw her, she had already rehearsed the cruel words she needed to say. She called him in for a private conversation, closing the door and trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to talk to you about your future at the company," she began, avoiding looking directly into his eyes. "Sure," he replied, still unaware of the formal tone she was forcing. "About the promotion you mentioned?" "There will be no promotion," she said coldly. "In fact, there is no longer a position for you here. Your services are no longer needed." The silence that followed was deafening. He looked at her in disbelief, trying to find some sign that this was a cruel joke or a misunderstanding. "I don't understand," he murmured. "I thought that you were satisfied with my work." "You were wrong," she replied, each word cutting her own heart like a blade. "I let myself get carried away by a moment of weakness, but now I realize it was a mistake. You're nothing but an ex-fudge vendor trying to take advantage of a rich and lonely woman." The words came out of her mouth like poison, each one a lie that poisoned her from within. She saw the exact moment he understood what was happening, the pain spreading across his face like a blood stain. "You're not serious," he said, taking a step towards her. "After everything we've been through, after everything we've talked about." "It was just fun," she interrupted, forcing contempt into her voice. "Did you really think that a woman like me would get seriously involved with someone like you? You were too naive." He recoiled, as if he had been punched. For long moments, he just looked at her, searching for some trace of the woman he had known, the woman who had held his hands and cried in his arms. "Security will escort you to the exit," she continued, turning to the window so she wouldn't have to see the pain in his eyes. "Your personal belongings will be sent to your home." When she finally found the courage to turn around again, he was already gone. Only his cologne remained in the air, a ghostly reminder of what she had lost because of her own cowardice. The months that followed were the darkest of her life. She threw herself into work with a manic intensity, accepting every project and commitment that came her way, desperately trying to forget the emptiness he had left behind. But late at night, alone in her luxurious apartment, the memories haunted her like relentless ghosts. Through discreet contacts, she learned that he had returned to selling fudge on the streets, but was now visibly thinner and more dejected. The boy, according to reports, had asked several times about the pretty lady who used to call home, but the father only replied that she had traveled far away. It was when she discovered the truth that her life was turned upside down again. An accidental conversation between two members of the board, which she overheard through the ajar door of a meeting room, revealed the cruel manipulation she had been a victim of. "The plan worked perfectly," said a voice she recognized as belonging to the vice president. "She really believed we were going to destroy her boyfriend's career. Now we have total control over her again." "Yes," agreed another voice. "We couldn't allow her to find happiness. A woman in love is a woman distracted from business. Now she is completely focused on work, exactly as we want." The revelation was like a lightning bolt from the blue. They had never really intended to harm him. The whole threat had been a staging to manipulate her. They had used her love against her, turning her greatest strength into her greatest weakness. The fury that took over her being was unlike anything she had ever felt. It was cold, calculated, and absolutely determined. They had underestimated who they were dealing with. She was not just a rich heiress. She was a woman who had multiplied her inheritance through intelligence and determination, and now she would use those same weapons against those who tried to destroy her happiness. The search for him began that same day. She scoured the streets of the city personally, something she hadn't done in years, looking on every corner where he might be selling his fudge. When she finally found him, on a street far from the shopping district, her heart almost stopped. He was visibly thinner, his eyes that once shone with hope, now dull and tired. The boy was playing beside him, building castles with pebbles on the ground, oblivious to his father's suffering. When he saw her approaching, his face hardened. He picked up his son and began to walk away, but she ran after him, calling his name desperately. "Please," she begged when she finally managed to reach him. "I need to explain. I need you to know the truth." "The truth?" he replied bitterly. "The truth is that I was foolish enough to believe that someone like you could care about someone like me. They forced me," she said, tears running freely down her face. "They threatened to destroy you, destroy any chance you had of getting a job. I couldn't let that happen." It was then that the boy, who had remained quiet in his father's arms, reached out his little arms towards her. "Pretty lady," he exclaimed with joy, escaping his father's arms and running to hug her legs. At that moment, she understood that she was not only fighting for the man she loved, but for a family she never knew she wanted. She knelt on the ground and hugged the child, feeling her heart rebuild piece by piece. The final revelation came when she confronted the board with irrefutable proof of their manipulation. Secret recordings, documents that proved the conspiracy, witnesses who had been bribed to lie. But her revenge was not to destroy these men. It was something much more powerful. She relinquished full control of the company, retaining only a stake that guaranteed her financial independence. With her share of the profits and investments, she created her own firm, smaller but built on values that really mattered. The request for forgiveness was made on the same street where they met, but this time she was on her knees before him, begging for a second chance, while the boy held both of their hands, creating the bridge that would reconnect two broken hearts. "I choose you," she said, looking into the eyes of the man she had learned to love. "I choose our family. I choose our happiness above any fortune." And when he finally kissed her again, with his son laughing between them, she knew she had found the most valuable wealth there is. A true love and a family united by choice, not by blood, but by the conscious decision to love each other unconditionally forever. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment, giving a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.